No worries. Well, we're actually right on time. Very happy about that. So I'm gonna go ahead and kick us off. So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Theon Masters, and I lead growth at Imagine Deliver. Imagine Deliver is a consulting firm for the new majority. We drive clients to activate insights and strategies that benefit everyone, especially those with intersectional identities. The title of our panel today is Great Realization, Redefining the Meaning of Work in a Post-Pandemic World. I know you've all probably had the chance to check out our panelists, but for a refresher, why don't we just go around the room and have everyone give a quick introduction. Panelists, you could give us about a 30-second rundown of who you are, your pronouns, your organization, and your role. Adair, since I have you on my left starting, could you kick us off?
Sure, absolutely. Adair Mosley, I serve as the president and CEO of Pillsbury United Communities for roughly 10 more days. And in October, will be the new president and CEO of the African American Leadership Forum.
Thank you. Erinn, could you go next, please?
I would be delighted. Hi, all. My name is Erinn Farrell. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a co-founder and partner of The Coven. And I'm just so delighted to be here with so many friends. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Dario, we have you go next, please?
Yes, Dario Otero, CEO and founder of Youth Lens 360. We are a video production company that tells your story with confidence and helps you to get your point across to people. And we do storytelling, but we also mentor youth through the process. So as they're going through the process of telling your story, they're also learning how to start their own business and be storytellers themselves.
Thanks, Dario. Bella, would you be able to introduce yourself? Next.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Bella Lamb. She, hers. I am the of Coconut West. So we are a mission-driven vegan and gluten-free food company that specializes in breakfast and bake mixes, so pancakes, cookies, and waffles. And wait, is that it? That's all I gotta say, right?
Well, I didn't actually know that you had waffles too. I might have to check that out.
Oh yes, we have waffles. You can actually use the pancake mix for waffles. You know, so that's yeah. That's
okay. Thanks. And Taqee, could you round us off?
Yeah, sure. Taqee Khaled. I'm a co-founder and principal at Imagine Deliver for business development and growth, and really excited to see all these amazing perspectives and experiences on the screen with us here, and really grateful for the 23 folks watching as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, 23 folks and growing. So this panel is an opportunity for us to just hear perspectives from diverse leaders in a range of sectors, as you could see, from startups to community engagement, technology to CPG, and how the pandemic has impacted how we work today and implications for how we work in the future. So to kick us off, I just want to poll each of you on what you're paying attention to these days as a leader. So specifically, what is the most exciting workforce trend that you feel has emerged over the last couple of years?
So much good stuff. I can jump in. I am obviously a little biased as a founder of the Coven, where we have, been seeing pre-Panny for many years, what kind of a hybrid work environment looks like. But I think, I was speaking with one of our members recently about how, it's like, we know that we're not going back to the way things were, but there isn't really quite a new normal yet either, that we keep kind of evolving through a multitude of new normals for folks. And I think, although that can certainly feel overwhelming at times, and maybe even a little unstable, I do really like to see and watch all of these really fabulous organizations, particularly small to mid-sized organizations, really just remaining nimble and remaining open and recognizing that, like, things may shift and things may change, and kind of, I don't want to say making things up on the fly, but being willing to kind of change approaches with the needs of their employees. And so whether that means more remote work or identifying those times where it does make sense for folks to be together, recognizing that maybe the work environment, that some of those relationships can be social relationships, and that's when to get together, and then work can be kind of at home or in other ways. And so I think those are kind of the trends. Like globally, I'm just really excited to see leaders be very open and willing to be just kind of assessing and reassessing consistently about how folks show up in quote unquote the office, whatever that might be.
I'll add to that. I think one of the trends that is extremely promising and must remain is our focus on centering well-being and ensuring that individuals are well, and that we're more concentrated on workers' health and livelihoods, and we're thinking more holistically about how to support that individual, and knowing that when we do that, we get better productivity, we get better engagement from our staff. And frankly, right, shame on us as a collective, right? I know that individual organizations have there are some that were progressive in this space, but that we weren't putting our people at the center of these conversations inside of our companies, inside of our organizations. So the question, are you well, must continue to remain as a trend.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I think what's interesting, what I'm seeing that I'm excited about is really the ability to open up the door for new people that have different ways of showing their intelligence, right? So you're starting to see companies say, you may not have to go get that 4-year degree right away. We'll train you, certify you right here in the company, and then you can go back to school while you're working for us, right? Like people are opening those doors and saying, we want to see people that know how to build their own personal brand and then bring their brand into our company, right? So you start to see the entrepreneur mindset being somebody that is hireable, right? Because you bring in those skill sets of building your own brand, being a storyteller, those things that now are emerging that you didn't always see when you were going through the education system. And so it's opening doors for people that may not have had that traditional education, system work for them. I'm starting to see a trend of acceptance. If you could show a portfolio of work, if you could show that you are doing things other than just succeeding in like English and math, right? But like, are you volunteering? Are you being a part of an organization? Are you helping drive change in your community? Those things are starting to be valuable to companies as well.
Yeah. Oops. Yeah, I'd love to share more of like a smaller organization and start experience. We have a smaller team, and I've realized that what's important is really understanding their work style and how they work even as a personality, and empowering them in that way. And I realized that my style of leadership is I love working with other self-starters. Like I don't have to micromanage. I don't have to really get to start projects. It's really like this collaborative, almost like a peer-to-peer relationship. And that's been how we've been able to really retain our staff and really identify who we want to work with.
No, I'll add that I feel like part of what maybe the sum of what you all have been talking about have also led employers to think about, I think, is like, what's the meaning of like minimum, right? What's the meaning of minimum support? What's the minimum like that enables somebody to be successful? I think in a pre-pandemic space, we were able to just kind of go with whatever the trend of how you write a job description looks and how an orientation and an onboarding looks, right? And now you onboard folks virtually, you onboard folks, in a hybrid or a fully, no longer existing physical workplace. and you start to ask the questions of like, well, what do I really want from people who join my organization? And I think that's super overdue, and it's a good sort of like process and systems check for leaders to be super clear about what they want from folks and what folks get from them.
I think you touched a little bit on my next question, which is, what's troubling you about workforce trends right now? So you talked about, everyone talked about what's exciting. What are some trends that are troubling you from the pandemic?
I'll chime in first on this one. I think the lack of a global view. I think we often don't understand what's going on in other countries, other places where we can grow from, you know, and here in the United States, we seem to think that we have it all figured out. And I think that we could really expand our mind and open our mind to what's going on. I mean, you know, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now, technology wise, was already happening in Africa 10 years ago. So like, why did we just start using some of the stuff like virtual currency and stuff when they've been using it for years? And those type of things that I feel we're behind in the workforce. We don't look to other countries for leadership. We always think we have it solved. I'll call out Adair because I know you just got back from overseas. I'd love to hear some of the stuff that you saw when you were over there, because I'm sure you opened and expanded your mind.
That's an invitation to speak, I'm assuming. You know, and I guess I'll echo, and this is probably not only both in the workplace dynamics or work trends, but kind of as a society, how we do things, right, in our systems and our policies and our infrastructure. And I see countries, especially those, I'll use the global South for an example here, who are with far less resources, both financial and human capital, but are enterprising and thinking about systems far more rapidly and at a pace of change that you would expect to be on par with the global North. And the global North, and especially in America, I think we have a great sense of a lot of hubris and a lot of that we are the pace setters and the trends, and then we get out on the global landscape and see that things from elections to transportation infrastructure to built communities, built environments where there are communities that are extremely progressing, and I think that would transcend to the workplace as well.
I'll go if that's okay. One thing that stresses me out a little bit is, you know, trends of seeking to return to a past normalcy. I think we've yet to sort of like get a full escape from that. We haven't fully been disabused of that notion that like that's gone forever. But it is gone forever, you know? And so there is still like a set of, you know, of various types of organizations in various sectors and various roles also, and essential roles, who are being sort of like forced into, despite everything that's going on and how everything has shifted, to just kind of, hey, let's just try to get you back into the exact same format as we used to see you before. And I think that drives a heavy outflow of their people, probably, and that's huge risk.
Oh, go ahead, Erinn. Go.
I was just gonna to jump on a little bit to what Taqee said. I think that's incredibly well articulated in terms of this kind of need, a human need, obviously, to feel safe, right? So oftentimes you go to this space of like what is familiar. And I would say that this feels less for me as something that is troubling and more as I want to remain kind of aware of it. I love the question that Adair asked earlier of like, are you well and how are you well? And I think about many of us who are certainly are on this conversation, and I'm sure watching, it's, if we're in this kind of entrepreneurial slash startup slash small business space, like the last few years have been pure survival, both like physically and emotionally and financially and all of these things. And we've been gripping so tight for so long. And that I think, I can only speak for myself, and I'm just really starting to process what my body and my mind and I've been through the last few years as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur. And so, when I think about, am I well? How am I well? How can I ensure wellness within, my family, for myself, for my organization, for my staff? I think about that, like, well, how do we not just return to the familiar? How do we not just go back to what made us maybe feel safe before, but really find that nice space of making room and holding space for what can be new and pursuing what is well within that. And so I think that's, again, I don't know if it's necessarily something that I see as troubling, but I think it's more of like a thing I want to be aware of, is like, we're not post-pandemic. We're not after something. We're in the midst of all of this. So how do we ensure that we're kind of caring for ourselves and each other within that?
Yeah, I would say like it sounds like just like having really high attunement to like what's going on, and not just think it's like an all-in-one solution, or it's like we're just trying to problem solve together. And as I'm like thinking about how we want to build our team moving forward, and talking to just like my peers and other folks building their organizations, I've realized that it's really important to like actually ask your employees like what they actually want. I had a friend, he's in Portland and he works for PR, and he talks about how his firm has like Taco Tuesdays, and they have like a ping pong table at their workstation. But he's like, I actually don't want any of that. I want to get home and I want to get paid like more than I'm getting paid. And so it's like really listening to that. And then also, just listening to that essentially and being really attuned.
I think this conversation, Taqee, you kind of sparked it a little bit, and we've delved into the question of wellness and in the workplace. It got me thinking specifically about the idea of quiet quitting. Quiet quitting, is it really something that's new? Haven't many people since the beginning of existence of jobs engaged in quietly doing bare minimum, so to speak? What's new about the dialogue for all of you? And are you doing anything differently as a leader as a result?
I would love my take. I feel like with being in business for 4 years, I've realized kind of the rituals or the cycles, I guess, and the seasons, and that it's when you feel like quitting, it's really a sign of like needing to rest and recalibrate. And so looking at it through that lens has been really helpful. That's just from a founder's perspective. But that's all I got to say for that.
In regards to our team, we are communicating a lot better. So we're working on our communication between the team and like really focusing in on strategies to be able to work effectively if somebody, is dealing with some situations at home, or a child is sick and they have to stay home, and different things. We support them through having better lines of communication so that when they are at work, they feel like they want to personally be there and do their best. So we're leaning in a lot more on the side of like, what makes you want to be a part of this team, and how do we communicate better with you as a company and make sure that you feel like you want to be here. We got a new facility that is pretty exciting and new that, it's exciting to just be in the space. So that we've done those type of things to kind of make it exciting to be back in the space. And we've limited the amount of days, but increased the time in the day. So, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're all here in the office, but you got a lot of free time on your Mondays and Fridays. So you could be on the island somewhere handling your business if you need to. And we embrace that instead of making it seem like it's something that is not good. And that allows for people to show up when they do come here in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I think they work harder than if they worked a 5-day work day. So
I love that, Dario. I think it's so interesting, this kind of the hot conversation around quiet quitting, because I think there's this element of, I do think it's always been present. And to me, it feels less of like, that's the issue or that's the real hurt. And it feels much more right of a symptom of something else, which I think we've all maybe touched on in one way or another, that it's like connectedness, open lines of communication, really shedding this like assumption that as leaders, we have to have the perfect solution at all times and somehow be able to intuit exactly what everyone in our organization needs. That's how you get ping pong tables and Taco Tuesdays. It's like, you're just like, oh, I'm assuming that that's what everybody wants. Like, of course, everybody wants to, you know, be able to have a keg in the office. Like, I think most of us on this call have probably been at least at the very least peripheral to a lot of those cultures and have said like, yo man, that's not for me. So I think that there's something so important to be said of like shedding that, again, that assumption, like I need to know everything about what my employees need, my staff needs, my community needs, and more about I need to be in a position to ask. Like I need to be in a position to really listen, to not talk and to really listen. And I think then that kind of concept of quiet quitting potentially starts to melt away a little bit, because those folks don't need to be quiet. They feel heard, they feel seen, hopefully they feel celebrated. So I just love what everyone else on this call is saying about, you know, that connectedness and just, yeah, creating the solutions that your folks really are asking for, not that you've imagined they need.
If I may add to that, Erinn, because one of the things that I did, and especially when you're working in somewhat large institutions, I think it can become for leaders to be extremely removed from the folks that are on the ground. Most of the people I interface with are, you know, executive leaders, a part of the institution, and their goal of, you know, making sure the organization runs. But I said, and not as that I want to minimize or the role of the leaders in the organization, but I needed to directly hear from people. So I created the conditions to be able to do that, to bring people across our organization on a quarterly basis without the executive leaders in the room, and simply fostering that idea of that you can come to me, not just saying it's an open door policy in a written handbook, but really showing that actually exists. And part of that process is I've gotten down to where it's about 3 or 4 questions that I'm really asking people. A, can you show up as your full self? Do you feel like, you know, with limitations, but a few limitations, but for the most part, you can authentically show up as you? And that one of the things that I've used as a benchmark, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's probably not in any research, but I tell people, right, if you get to this place of where you're both burnt out and stressed, or the work is not fueling you, come to me. Right? Because I want to be an organization, I want to be a leader that says, I can make an intentional investment in you. I can perhaps pivot that job description to now fulfill this piece of you where you're seeking purpose. And if I can't, I am committed to helping you go elsewhere. And I think we make separation adversarial, and it doesn't have to be, right? People are in an evolution of their lives where they are seeking something different. We all are. And what I think people want to say is, I see you, I hear you, I want to support you, whether it's in our institution or elsewhere. And I have just really reduced all barriers for people to say, you know, you don't have to quiet quit. You don't have to be complacent. You can just truly come to me because I care about you. And so I think it's incumbent upon leaders to just absolutely show a default to caring about people.
I love that, everything that you said, and I'm trying, I was trying to think about how we have thought about things over the past year and a half or so. I think some of the things that we are we try to think about in terms of knowing your folks well is, I think we've implemented things in onboarding around just like asking people things that help us to build the way we see one another at work. So like one thing that we ask is like, how do you receive gifts and compliments, right? So that like you understand how different, because that way you learn about people who don't want to be in any limelight whatsoever, and others who actually love to hear about, different types of recognition. And if you treat everybody the same in that regard, and let's say in an ideal world as a manager, you have a reasonable amount of direct reports that you can reasonably know a decent amount of, information about, that's going to help you, right, as a leader. And then we also more recently started to do like team-wide strength finders, but use them in much more intentional ways to say, oh, so like I tend to be more analytical about this, and I'm more relational about this, and that's why I see it that way. So we do the thing, but we bring it into the conversation. So we might say, I know you don't like to receive gifts, but I'm really bringing you this box of cookies. I'm sorry. And it's like, maybe, you didn't listen to what they said, but you brought it up that you knew that, like, right? I'm giving a tongue-in-cheek example, but yeah, I think we've done a lot of that. That I think is a thing that I'm seeing others do as well. Just like, how do you know folks better? How do you meet folks where they tell you they're coming from, right?
I love that so much. My cousin, who's a dear friend of mine, she is a science teacher, actually. she builds maker spaces in high schools and community centers, and she has this great kind of opening when she's chatting with whether it's students or partners or whoever, and her question is, "Tell me your maker story. How did you get to this work in this moment?" And she asked me this one night when we were out for dinner, and I was like, "Oh my God, I love that so much." Like, I don't consider myself like in the maker category, but I just feel like it's so applicable. And I think there is that element of, recognizing and inviting folks, and you're inviting folks into the space, whether that space be, what Adair was talking about in kind of like a larger corporate setting, or inviting that space may be in a cohort, it may be as an employee, but really understanding like, what is it that brings them, whether it's as a founder or as with entrepreneurial spirit, or, kind of the boldness of who they are as a person, and what brings them to this work in this moment. I think you can find so much out about people and help them open up, and also recognize that their worth is beyond what their title is in your organization or the tasks that they're fulfilling, but, really as part of that, kind of community within your org.
Oh, sorry about that. Bella, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, at the end of the day, I feel like everyone, we're humans first, and so it's like really asking them like for our love, like doing love languages, and it sounds really weird and too personal, but like let's say your physical touch, right? We own a cafe, so we work really hands-on with our staff, and just like a simple high five or like a simple pat on the back, like that really makes them feel a part of the organization and that you really care about them, because we do, right? And so it's like, how do you treat them as a human first, and everything else kind of falls into place. So I love what Taqee said about just understanding what speaks to them or what really impacts them, and how they communicate and receive and give love.
We use love languages a lot. We love that. It's so cool that you all are doing that too, because it links so much to how you give and receive so many other things other than like just love, right? It's how you build relation.
So that last question actually got me thinking a lot about what I originally was meaning to ask now, which was what sort of flexibility you've introduced into your work. But actually, after hearing you all talk about some of the different solutions you've brought forth to listen to your employees, I'm wondering if I could take it a step outside of flexibility, see what kind of strategies you've brought to your business in order to either listen or meet the needs more of your employees as leaders.
I can jump in here. So there's a couple of things that we've done. I think this was the first time we instituted it was in the summer of 2020. So essentially what it has been across the calendar year. As an organization, we do 3 specific weeks of time off where our entire staff is off at the same time. And that includes our hourly workers, it includes our full-time workers, just really everyone who's a part of our wonderful organization. And as I was saying, we instituted this in that summer. I mean, to be honest, it was in the halo of after the murder of George Floyd, and how certainly we were all kind of navigating the depths of the pandemic and wondering if our business was going to survive, much less our community. And we, I think, really took to heart the fact that we cannot show up for our community if we are not showing up for ourselves. And so that was the first time, I think, prior to that, if I'm being totally honest, there was this sense of like, we've got to be open all the time. Like, we got to be there at 7 and closing at 7 and make sure that people always have a chance to come and utilize the space and utilize the coven. And that summer we made a different choice and said, we all just need a break, and we need a break at the same time so we can truly all be away. And it was really beautiful and life-giving, and it allowed people, I think, the chance to just kind of step away in a really true fashion that they had not had the opportunity to do. And so we've replicated that, and we've actually extended it in the years since. So like I said, now we do that 3 weeks a year. And it's always so great coming back and very joyous getting back together. We just had one recently the last week of the summer, and like to hear from our employees, like the things that they were able to say yes to, there was like, I got to say yes to like going on this last minute trip, or I got to say yes to this dinner, or I got to say yes to sitting and like watching Netflix for 2 days in a row, like whatever that might be. Just really, I think it was really lovely. And I imagine it's something we'll do forever moving forward. I think, that just making sure that we're holding space for that wellness, and not that it can only happen on vacation time, but that in addition to all of the, vacation time that we have or time away from the office, that we're, kind of committing to this as a staff all at the same time has been really important, and some real true time off, right? Time away. So that's been one thing that's been really important. And the second, I actually just want to add on really quickly, it's kind of a reflection of what Adair was talking about earlier about creating the conditions for conversation. I think one of the most important things that we can do as leaders, and leaders doesn't have to be a title, right? It's just whom we are in the world, is to recognize the importance of modeling the behavior and modeling what we hope to be able to provide for others, or for others to provide for themselves. And so I think we, as myself and my 3 co-founders, have done a really intentional job these last few years, really modeling mental health, mental well-being. What are the times that we need? We are in therapy as a group of 4. We are very honest about that with our staff, with our community. I personally have my own, therapy practice. We talk about those things and how important they are. And we also model when we need a mental health day. Like, we don't say, hey guys, I'm sorry, I'm busy, I'm offline today, or whatever. Like, it's literally like, I need a mental health day today. I'm going to be off. I'll check back in with you later. And I think taking on the importance of modeling that and recognizing that those are a couple really distinct things that we've done, that I'm really hopeful or continue to have an impact for our staff and our community as well.
I think here at Youth Lens 360, we just opened up to be more understanding of family needs. And so it's not uncommon to see a young person in the space, usually my kids, but see somebody's kids bringing their kids in, setting up an iPad, hanging, maybe even grabbing a camera or being a part of a shoot. It's just a little bit more common and open right now to see kids at the workspace. And we were really intentional about finding our own space. And so we partnered with D'Angelo Spinkison from NAO Partners, whose staff grew to about almost, I think he's at like 19 or 20 people. And then we have our staff, and then also a nonprofit called Bridgemakers, which we opened our doors with. So we're all in the same space on the 12th floor of Osborne 370. And we just decided to make a space that was just more comfortable, and we didn't have to worry about being loud a little bit every once in a while if we wanted to, or, the occasional turn up on a Friday where people feel like they, just more flexible, it just feels good. And so that flexibility was something that was really important to us.
Yeah, I would add the one thing that's desperately, I think, missing from society as a whole, but the thing that I try to practice the most is just an empathetic approach to leadership. I oftentimes, my life looks very different than the staff, most of the staff that's in the organization. I don't go home to kids, right? And so, but I don't negate this responsibility that I do need to put myself in their shoes and mentally just walk myself through what is a parent trying to do, right? In the morning, in the evenings, right? And then during this moment of COVID, I started to help really craft policies around that. Right? Who do I need to solve for in this organization that just does not absolutely have the lived experience that I have from a day-to-day? And that led us down a path of, for example, we allocated each week roughly 10 hours of flex time that staff could use. And so whatever that meant for you in your life. So I had some folks that said, from 8 to 9, it is really hard for me to be online and do work because I'm trying to get this kid to a computer, sit down. So, okay, I'm going to use my hour there and I'm going to use it on the back end every day. And just having people determine what they need, just giving them the resource or the tool, and then they determining how they want to be able to use that was just a way that I appreciated the way in which we supported our individuals that work. And it's something that I didn't want to lose. The other thing I would say is, especially in an organization where everyone doesn't have the same job, there are different roles. It is so important. It was so important for me to pay attention to, while people may profess that they want to serve community and they want to be in the buildings every day, over time, resentment will grow. If one employee gets to stay at home every day and the other employee, because of the job function, requires them to be in person. So while I don't have, so I was very attentive to not putting blanket policies in place and really tailoring things to teams and individuals. And so this group may get a week sometimes, while the others may get the 10 hours because they can use that more flexibly. But we really were able to, again, tailor those policies specific to the needs of individuals and teams within the organization. So those are things that that I'll have. I'll add one other, and this is not related to COVID, but it's something that's long bothered me, that I changed in the organization. And I think it's just us again putting ourselves in the place of where people are in their lives. And one has been the bereavement policy. I eliminated it. Typically it's 2 to 3 days on bereavement, and then you got to return back to work. I eliminated it completely and said, whatever you need, because we can't put timeline on people's grief and the things in which they are. I've known people who they weren't family, but they grieved it as hard as they lost a mother or a child. And so saying simply, whatever you need. And I think it's those kinds of things where we center people and we center what they need in their lives to be well, to be whole, actually gets us to a place of both kinship and not seeing our employees as commodities.
This conversation is so good. I think she's taking notes, and I am as well, and just like learning so much. So so grateful to be here. I think for me, I think it's having a lot of like self-awareness, and for me, I am more relational first, and I'm more creative, and if I could, it would just be like me working and just drawing on a big whiteboard all day. And so what I realized that our team needs is that we need structure and we need accountability. And so that's how I'm serving our team is being the one that says, hey, like we're meeting, every Monday, and the rest of the week, like we're working or communicating when needed, or whatever works for you. So it's more kind of flowy, but just having that Monday and making sure that we're always checking in on Monday weekly, and then doing a monthly meeting, and then like a quarterly meeting. We use the EOS model, so the entrepreneurial organization system, and through that, like we've been able to really create the structure so then we can have these consistent check-ins, these consistent conversations, because if not, like I could go like a month without talking to my team, and I've done that before, and it's like that's not how we can scale and grow. So just having that awareness and being like, we need that structure, and I need to protect it. Like that's been something I've from business this past year, especially.
Well, it feels like between what you were saying and what Adair was saying, that both of you, and we kind of do this too, is like kind of like have to also ask the underlying question of like, what do different roles need for this organization to be successful? And then therefore, and then combined with like understanding my people and my teams better, how can I look at the need of what that role needs to accomplish, what the needs of the people are, and then, not apply broad strokes, and maybe connecting back to things that have changed since the start of the pandemic. Maybe that's one of the biggest things, is that broad strokes can solve some things or can address some things, but actually like work counter to other things when we start to acknowledge like the differences that people are living when they come to the workplace.
So for this next one, I actually want to switch it around a bit and put the microscope on you. I know you've been talking about what you do in your organizations. It's a very diverse panel, not just with the industries you work with, but the identities we hold as well. How do you think the pandemic has affected the way you show up at work in your identity? And could I have actually, Taqee, you kick us off for this one?
Oh, you really identified me well. Geez, I'll act as though I have something prepared. How do I show up? So I think, so I have a lot of neuroatypicality that I learned about later in my life, because typically I just thought that was something that I needed to just work through and figure out how to show up at work in the way everybody else was. I think the pandemic has shown us that everybody else was also thinking that, and we were all doing mutual game theory of like showing up in the way that you're supposed to show up in the workplace. And there's actually much more atypicality. So as a leader and as somebody who has different ways that I think, I think what I try to do is I've tried to delve actually a bit more deeply into knowledge of myself and what things that I do as a default depict for my team members. And do they line up with things that I'd like to demonstrate? And do they line up with things that I would like them to feel good about, absorb, all of that. So for example, my default state is just really different than what my active state is in a workplace. And I, as a leader, have invested in knowing what that difference is and trying to actively tune that to what my team members need. So that's been something of my identity, I think, that has shown up more actively than it ever has in the past.
We could go back to popcorn. I just wanted to pick on
I
Taqee
know.
for that.
I'm like, I always feel like I'm the first one to jump in, so I'll take it. Taqee, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so glad to know that, and I can't wait to talk to you more about that because I do think there is so much around that default and active states that, to your point, I think we probably collectively haven't had the ability to have a lot of intelligence around or the chance to, so much about work can at times feel like conformity, and that you're just like following whomever is ahead of you or has done it before. And it's so easy to kind of miss out on those things about yourself. So I'm so thankful that you shared that. I'm so grateful for our friendship and to learn from you. I think from an identity standpoint, two things that have felt really present in these last couple of years, and again, I feel like at this point, like there's no going back, is my role as a parent. I loved what Dario was sharing before about just like there's just more kids in the space, and that's like having that kid energy and that feeling of like. Do you all remember really early on? This might have even been pre-pandemic, but there was that like video that was going around about like the guy on the BBC who was talking, and then his like daughter like walked in the back, and she was like doing, she was like all proud of herself, and then all of a sudden the like baby came in on the little like walker, and I felt like this was like this like huge global moment of everyone was like, oh, that's so hilarious, and then like fast forward a handful of weeks later, and we're like, oh shit, that's all our lives, like we're all doing that. I should say everybody, but anyone who may have small humans around or four-legged humans or whatever. It was just like all these people in our lives showing up. I guess, yes, Diana, totally right. That girl with the glasses had the best swagger. I mean, legit, she was like 4 and is like the energy I'd like to carry in my life always. But I think it's been a real opportunity to be able to use these last couple of years to not be so cognizant of or aware of trying to create boundaries between work and life and what all of that means, and trying to keep things in neat little boxes, but kind of embrace the messiness a little bit. And I mean, I am a huge advocate for boundaries for sure, but I also think like it's also been nice to say like, yeah, my kids are a huge part of my life. They show up literally whether I want them to or not. And my work is a huge part of my life, and my community is a huge part of my life, and they show up in ways. And so I think really just being a little cognizant of that and recognizing that that messiness is actually a really important part of my own identity, that I share, that I carry myself as a founder and community member of the Coven when I am at home and when I am interacting with my family, as much as I carry, my identity as a parent is when I'm with my community as well. So I think that's been really important, and newer for me. And then also certainly I've mentioned it a couple of times, and I'll never, stop. It's like the importance of mental health and mental awareness, and the willingness to be curious about yourself, and whether that's through, a therapy practice or a coaching practice or in deep community with your family members or folks who are around you. I think it's such an unbelievable relief to know, that everything that doesn't make sense in your head actually might totally make sense to somebody else and may help you through that. And I think it's important to lean into that. So those are important parts of my identity. I've really tried to be more open to these last few years in particular and moving forward.
I'll chime in. This might not be the norm, but I think I've taken more risk. I'm not as timid or scared to try something new or do something that wasn't a common thing before. We've actually grown, when a lot of people were unfortunately not, because, we had doors open that never used to be open before George Floyd's murder, before the pandemic, before a lot of other things. I mean, all of a sudden doors swung open, and we took risks to be able to be in positions, where we could gain from that. And so, unfortunately, a lot of people that grew before all those things happened, that wouldn't let us in those doors, lost, you know, big. And so we just benefited from a lot of opportunities that never were there before. I'm sitting in a space right now that we never could have afforded before, but this company closed down 20 locations all over the country, and they all went to work from home. And we're like, we'll go into the office. You know what I mean? So we flipped that into, you know, something that was a benefit for us. And so I know it may sound weird, but yeah, we just took more risk, and we just said, like, you know, your days are not promised, tomorrow's not promised, and all these things are going on. It's like, let's take these risks now.
Yeah, going off of that and what Taqee said about conformity, I feel like all my life I've always felt like I needed to conform or assimilate to certain rooms. And, you know, throughout the pandemic and just my time in business, I've realized that my role as a leader isn't for me. It's really for those who didn't see themselves in positions like me. And so that gave me, just like during the pandemic, I felt like even more empowered to really just double down on who I am. Like, I'm not the typical CEO or founder. I like to be at home. I don't consider myself a girl boss. I cry when I talk about retiring my parents. Like, I cry about anything. I'm like hypersensitive. And during the pandemic, I really just like embraced that and shared that openly and was vulnerable. And that was really what led me to like attract our talent and also like our customers and even those who are aspiring to build a business. And so I think during the pandemic, it was just like the perfect time for me to slow down, pause, and self-reflect on like who I want to be. Because before the pandemic, I was showing up like, yeah, I'm so proud of working 60 hours or 70 hours, 80 hours a week over the weekends, and, you know, missing out on holidays and missing family dinners. And it's like, no, I'm not proud of that. And like, that isn't me. And so the pandemic hit, I'm like, what really matters is like the people in my life and my family and taking care of our team members. And so, yeah, I really learned a lot about myself, and I just felt so much more empowered coming out of that, and still learning so much too. So.
So this one, I have a question relating to technology. So what's the role of technology in addressing all the things that we've talked about today? What does HR tech specifically need to do to support employees and employers? I'm actually gonna split you up into two groups. Could I have Adair, Erinn, and Taqee answer for employers, and Dario and Bella answer for employees side? This one might take a bit more. So let me just repeat it one more time. What's the role of technology in addressing the things we've talked about today? What does HR tech need to do to support employees and employers? So Adair, Erinn, and Taqee, employers, Bella and Dario, employees.
Yeah, I can come in certainly on the employer side. And I think that this is one, if you look at especially the private sector, technology is sometimes 25% or more of the budget. And there are a lot of investments that are being made in, especially those that are global companies, to connect people across the globe. The NGO sector has, frankly, I think we applaud ourselves of being on a shoestring budget, not spending the money on the things in which we need to actually function. And Um, uh, I think the COVID-19 certainly helped accelerate the dialogue, right? The conversation and the necessity that NGOs needed to make investments in technology to both use the latest innovations to connect with our communities, whether it was providing both mental health services or case management or support through a screen or through a cell phone. And that so we hadn't put a lot of emphasis there. So I'm extremely fortunate that there's critical investments being made there. But I think especially related to HR that certainly, and I'm constantly having conversations about the systems that can both help support professional and development, the tools, the technology that can do that, better onboarding practices and using technology and really implementing that into a seamless or an integrated process. And so those are the things that we've been able to lift up. I think it will continue to be at the center of the capacity that's necessary for NGOs, particularly to both augment, collaborate in our work.
I can speak from employee side, especially in a media company. Technology is a lot of what we spend our money on, and mostly in file saving and sharing. So if you can imagine during the pandemic when we were doing video production and we're shooting in 5K raw and we got a terabyte of footage, how do you share that across two different members and employees? And then when that employee gets it, is their computer powerful enough to be able to even view or edit that information? So the last 6 months, 7 months, we've really put probably about 50% of our income back into technology. But that's what separated us. We can move faster. We can provide a better product. And so when I say take risks, I'm serious. We had we had to invest back, and we found community members that were willing to invest with us. Think about students that weren't able to access the internet because their parents were working at home and they were working at home. So like we were really intentional about saying to employees on our staff, like, hey, what do you need to be able to do your job? Like, we'll upgrade your internet. We'll get you software, whatever it takes. Me personally, I struggle as a dyslexic person. So I went and got Grammarly Premium, and I told the staff, like, if you need Grammarly Premium, let me know, like, because we're going to be communicating a lot more. And you don't want your emails to sound all crazy and look all crazy. And so when you're talking to, clients, like, use the Grammarly Premium account. So things like that, just, we stepped it up in those areas.
We took some investment risk on our side where, taking it back to like the Great Realization versus the Great Resignation of like, what's the realization that leads to the resignation? Is that, how do organizations at scale value people, right? Right now, there's like two ways to value people. It's like the move them up in salary or job title, or move them, change their benefits, basically, right? Those are the levers for large orgs and entities. So we did a lot of research with workforce with folks and learned a lot more about how people were relating to one another and to their employer. And so we actually, so Dario, you talk about risk taking. We were like, well, maybe we should build a product that actually helps people see the hopes and dreams and abilities of people inside of large entities at scale. So that's something that we just thought that technology might be the only thing for scale to be able to do that. Like, we're talking here with middle or smaller size orgs as leaders here, but like we interact heavily, all of us, with large organizations that can't have the same locus of control that each of us do. So what can we move? So that's some technology investment that we've been doing and some risk taking that we've been doing to try to help people at scale value and see their people for what they bring to the table, and then make decisions based on that to help them do more, do different things.
Erinn, would you like to chime in on this one?
I think these brilliant gentlemen covered it all. I love it.
Okay, perfect. So I noticed that we are at 2:30. I did want to give the opportunity if there was anyone in the audience who had any questions to send to our panelists. You could feel free to just send it in the chat. While that's going on, I say everyone, of course, was writing. I had my pen on my paper going as well. What kind of takeaways are you going to have from our conversation today? Or what's one thing that you're going to implement in your daily work?
I have a full list there. I just really I love this. It feels like a call to action around creating the conditions for authentic communication to happen. And thinking about this specifically between or for us as a staff. And so really thinking about what are those types of questions to ask of the incredible staff that I have the privilege of working with and our team, and then thinking about what do those conditions look like, and then how may they change. I think it's just always important to recognize that things that may have worked in the past may no longer work for reasons within and outside of our control. And so just to kind of continue to ask that question, like, how do we create conditions for, truth and honesty and authentic connection to happen? So that's the thing I'm going to be taking away for sure, amongst others.
I think Taqee said something about strength finders. We're working with somebody to do insights, but we haven't done it yet. So I think I'm gonna pull the trigger on that and really get us insights profiles. If you're not familiar with it, it helps you work as a unit, really around how you show up in the workspace. And so we're gonna work together to get that done. I think just coming out of this conversation and hearing Taqee say that, I was like, yeah, we gotta get that done. So.
My takeaway is probably how much grace is needed, both to be on the receiving end of it and to also extend it. And so that's the thing that I hope that we all continue to carry in our work.
And I really liked what Dario said about risk-taking and fearlessness. It's too important of a time of change to be risk averse in many ways, and I'm going to take that as a take home of where I might be artificially limiting myself, or where I might still be dwelling with one foot in the pre-pandemic default, and try to think about that more intentionally and how I bring it to my team and my own leadership as well. So really great thoughts.
So we do have 2 questions in the Q&A. One from Eduardo Drake. What can you say about how you and others are showing and building mutual humanity on Zoom? Erinn laughed.
Did you say, was that last part on Zoom?
On Zoom.
Yeah, I would say I would probably say in a virtual environment generally. So
I mean,
anyone doing virtual work.
We did something that during the middle of the pandemic that I don't think has ever been done. We shot a whole documentary on Zoom, and we were able to travel to places I don't think we would have went because it was too far to go to all of them. We went to the Native American reservations all across North Dakota and Minnesota, and all via Zoom, asked questions, and it was acceptable because everybody was on Zoom. So, I mean, I just think it changed the way we thought about how we could use Zoom and virtual services to still bring people together from places that may not have been able to talk.
unless anyone else would like to jump in, I would go to this next question. And actually, Adair, I'm specifically interested in your answer for this because you talked about this a little bit, and I really felt the power of your answer. So how do you balance giving your staff enough flexibility while reaching your output goals? If you give too much flexibility, your output could decrease. So how do you prevent that?
Yeah, I think just being extremely clear on the front end on what are the goals. And, I tend to have a results only kind of work environment, and allowing individuals both to manage their own lives and the flow of how those things get done. But ultimately, we want to measure that output, that product at the end of it. I happen to not love the mornings. But I'm an extremely diligent worker in the evenings and at night, and can produce a lot of work. And so if we just only kind of concentrate on, and I don't think that those things are kind of antithetical and we kind of pit them against each other. And I don't necessarily know that they have to be, because I can give you an immense amount of flexibility to manage the things in which you need to do in your lives, while also saying that this is the product that must get done. Now, when people can't meet that, I would say, right, you have a bigger question than probably, are you in the office at this time of the day, ... right? That's probably not the solution. That we're probably leading to something that's a bigger performance management issue, or rather than, I don't think we limit the flexibility because the output is not necessarily there. It could be disengagement or a variety of things of why that is not happening. So I tell people I don't manage people. Like, you're adults. Like, really, this is really about managing the work. And so do the things that you need to do for yourself and your families. And as long as we agreed upon what that product is.
That was an excellent answer, as I expected. So I think we could end there. I'd like to thank you all for staying a little bit over, and just for a wonderful conversation. As I said, I have notes here. I'm sure you all have notes as well and stuff you're taking away from this. But thank you for coming, and everyone else that was listening, enjoy the rest of Twin City Startup Week.
Good job,
See you
Theon.
later.